In This World of Wonders, Memoir of a Life in Learning, written by Nicholas Wolterstorff, narrated by Trevor Thompson. Dedication. To Claire, to our children and their spouses, Amy, TJ, Eric, Robert, Mari, Klaus, Tracy, Christopher, and to our grandchildren, Nick, Maria, Ian, Nina, Phoebe, India, Case. Preface. I have written this memoir reluctantly, at the urging of several friends. I grew up in a Dutch immigrant community in southwest Minnesota, a community whose members retained the self-deprecating ethos of the Reformed Church in the Netherlands, in which they had been reared. That ethos conspired with Minnesota culture, also self-deprecating, to drill into us that we were never to call attention to ourselves. The idea was not that we were to think poorly of ourselves. Nothing wrong with taking quiet pride in one's accomplishments. And if someone pays you a compliment for what you have done, graciously accept their praise. But don't let it go to your head, and never toot your own horn. It was not a soil that nourishes autobiography. Add to this the fact that I have never kept a journal, and that my memory is no better than average. My memoir, if I were to write one, would be fact-starved compared with most memoirs. Even if I had kept a journal, and even if my memory were better than it is, why would anyone want to read about my life? Most of my days as an adult have consisted of reading philosophical books and articles, taking notes on my reading, thinking hard, writing philosophical books and articles, preparing notes for classes and public lectures, teaching classes and delivering public lectures, listening to talks and lectures, leading discussions, participating in discussions, talking with students and colleagues, reading student papers, and so on, year after year. Mine has been a life in learning, a life spent learning and a life spent sharing learning. There have been no affairs, no embezzling, no shootings, no addictions, no divorces, no serious accidents or illnesses, no gambling away of anybody's life savings. How dull. Why would anyone want to read about such a life? Boring. Maybe not. It has been my great privilege to have participated in an extraordinary renaissance of Christian philosophy, and of Christian learning more generally. Perhaps an insider's perspective on how this most unlikely development came about would be of interest to some people. Moreover, my life has not only been a life in learning, it's been a life of engagements with God, with family and friends, with institutions, with art, gardens, and buildings, with births, deaths, and suffering, engagements often surprising and unanticipated. Many of those engagements, in addition to being interesting in their own right, have shaped how I think. Readers might be interested in the awakenings, the affections, the opportunities, the sorrows that have led me to think what I have thought, to write what I have written, to love what I have loved, to support the causes I have supported. And something else might prove of interest to readers. Mine has not been the life of a solitary individual in an alien world, discovering his true self. Mine has been a life in community, in many communities. The communities of 2 small Minnesota villages, the community of an extended family, the community of Christian philosophers, the community of philosophers in general, of local religious communities, and of various academic communities. I have been shaped by those communities, by movements and developments within them, by their traditions. I have in turn contributed to shaping them. In the telling of my life, I would be telling about those communities, telling about them from the vantage point of my participation. Overall, my life in community has been an expansive opening out from the community of the small village in which I was reared. But though I long ago left that community for other larger communities, I have not left behind the ways in which I was shaped by that community. In particular, I have not left behind the religious tradition of Reformed Protestantism into which I was inducted. Running throughout the expansion of my life and community is the thread of religious continuity. The challenge I faced in describing this dimension of my life was to do so in such a way that those who are not religious, and those whose religion is quite different from mine, would not be put off. That is, the challenge of being particular without being parochial. The reader will discover that my way of being religious is very different from the aggressive, aggrieved, and adversarial way that is presently so prominent on the American scene. I decided to cope with the paucity of facts by not even attempting to write the story of my life. Instead, I would offer a series of vignettes, more or less following the order of my life. I would recall events and situations that were formative for me, projects and actions that contributed prominently to the shape my life has taken. Now and then I would recall an episode that was quirky or touching, memorable, even if not formative. A number of the vignettes tell of my life as a philosopher. The challenge I faced in telling about that part of my life was to compose the vignettes in such a way that philosophers would not find what I say too simplistic, and non-philosophers would not find it too complicated. I think of the succession of vignettes as scenes on a journey through the landscape of memory. As a scene catches my eye, I stop to look. I move on, and another scene catches my eye. There are benches here and there where I can sit and reflect on the significance of what I am seeing. Now and then, I glance ahead. A consequence of this memoir's being a series of vignettes and not the story of my life is that there is no dropping of names of famous people I have met. Nothing lost there. A related consequence, however, is that many longtime friends also never get mentioned. I very much regret that. Their absence from these pages certainly does not mean that I do not treasure their friendship. I am grateful to Kelly Clark, Ivy George, and Jan Pott for urging me to write this memoir, for wearing down my reluctance, and for reading successive drafts of the manuscript and offering sage advice for improvement. I also thank Terence Cuneo for reading and offering helpful comments on a draft. The title was suggested to me by Jan Pott. It's a line from J.M. Coetzee's novel of 1990, Age of Iron, which I quote in the final section of the memoir. A good friend, René von Boudenberg, called my attention to the fact that World of Wonders is also the title song of the 1986 album by the Canadian singer and songwriter Bruce Cockburn. May 2018.